Good morning and welcome to another video podcast from Hendy Consulting on the state of the flat panel industry. And I think everybody who's an observer will know that we're at the bottom of the cycle, in the crystal cycle now, with the panel prices back down at a low that we had in 2020. The lift in COVID in 2021 saw a race up of IT panels first and then TV panels as a result, really bringing panel prices back up. But those days are gone. And what I want to talk about is both the strategic context on what happens at the bottom of the cycle, but also a little bit more of the tactics of what seems to be going on at the bottom of this particular cycle. So as we know, we're back down at low pricing, and this is something that happens typically through the crystal cycle. And the secondary effect is that panel makers try to reduce panel utilization to further reduce their economic losses by shipping less at the bottom of the cycle. So all of this is known, and clearly it's a good thing for consumers. It's probably a good thing for set makers to a degree, and we'll talk about that, but it's not a good news at all for panel makers. But what seems to be making this shock this time round particularly unusual, in talking to a friend of mine in the industry, is the foreign exchange rate with the very strong dollar at the moment. The whole of the display industry is pretty much US dollar denominated, except of course when you sell to end markets. And so at the moment, a number of the big brands for the TV space in particular are really suffering with sort of relatively fixed consumer expectations of pricing, but dollar numbers that have changed quite a lot in the very few recent months. So then you've got basically a number of compounded shocks going on at the same time. And what that's leading to is a lot of whipping around in the supply chain and confusion about actually what is underlying demand and the actual direction. But actually, in talking to colleagues recently, the actual notion of actually if the world enters some sort of recession in coming months, then actually that typically tends to be good for TVs. People sit at home and watch television and don't travel in those situations. So the big picture for me has always been at the bottom of the cycle, two major things happen. Firstly, the big M&A deals tend to happen always at the bottom of the cycle. And there's a range of examples given in the top left here. And then to bring it more up to date, the CEC Panda deal was done with BOE at the bottom of the last trough in 2020. So this is when you actually get industry change in terms of its participants. But the other big thing is at the bottom of the trough is also when display players push their hardest to innovate in new technologies, and I show that a little bit below with the Phoenix motif. And it really is to give some upside into people's thinking about how the industry responds, that actually at the bottom of the cycle it's when people plan new factories, and at the bottom of the cycle it's when they also implement new technologies. So these are all upsides for the technical health of the industry, at least. And in the, one could argue in the bottom of the last cycle and or this one, what you are seeing is quite a lot additional energy being put into both mini LED and especially in Taiwan, and also micro LED, where actually I'm a believer that if die sizes come down as rapidly as they could do, then we could see an actually fairly bullish outlook on large panel micro LED. And it's not even surprising that companies like STC with their CEO JS Chair got up on YouTube and at IMID and actually gave a very expansionist view on the role of Samsung Display, talking about $100 billion as the emissive display market, which is a stretch, and then 50 billion alone for STC, which is an amazing stretch goal for them. But the bottom of the cycle is when people do their planning on the growth that will result and will come next. So overall, as a strategist, I tend to say, well, at the bottom of the cycle is good news typically for set makers, but maybe not this time with the Forex challenges. Typically good news for consumers, and difficult times in terms of the results for the display companies, actually some of the material companies that supply them, because they get put under such huge price pressure. But it's also the time at which innovation is pushed to the fore in terms of new technologies in the marketplace. So this is something that is the phoenix in its rebirth is something that's a great upside. And the other final blessing may be that the degree to which some Western economies go into some sort of recession, that is actually sometimes good for television. So anyway, this is where we are. We're at the bottom of the cycle in a market that's actually surprisingly more complex than just a low pricing environment. Thanks very much.